Bli Ayin Hara, Klal Yisrael is growing tremendously. Kein Yirbu. What does that mean? We need to move to neighborhoods where a lot of Frum people may not be living in, where there doesn't exist the Frum lifestyle infrastructure, and people that are living there before we move in are not used to our lifestyle. It's very, very worthwhile to find out what is the norm of that area. Taking back the garbage, cutting the grass, not leaving the bikes out. There are challenges. We need to have shuls, we need to have mikvahs, we would like to have erevs, we want to have yeshivas. It's only advantageous that the more we could educate our neighbors about our culture and our traditions and our lifestyle, we're better off. And we need to be proactive, not reactive that when we put it up, what's this? Proactive. We would like to do this. This is what it means. This is what it symbolizes. If we are more proactive, the less reactive we'll have to be in the long run.
In 4 years, the Pine Lake Park community went from 4 Frum families to 500 Frum families, and it's growing rapidly. Moving into the community, obviously the infrastructure is the first need that comes to focus. One of the first things that community needs to build is a mikvah. We had a fundraising campaign, we raised Baruch Hashem $900,000, and then the permitting process, the approvals, is the next thing on the line. At the same time, for many months, I knew that there will be a hearing eventually. I made it my business to meet with the immediate neighbors, create the relationships. It doesn't mean you're best friends with them, but it needs to be cordial. We know we need to live a life of a Jew and a life of Kiddush Hashem. May 2nd, 11:08 a.m. I'm at work, and all of a sudden I get a buzz. I look at it, it's a WhatsApp message from one of the people working alongside me to build this mikvah. When I look at my phone, I'm like horrified. I was shaking. It's a screenshot from a Facebook post. Apparently there's a private Facebook chat for the greater community. And what does it say? It's basically every piece of information about the mikvah and about the upcoming hearing. There are many, many comments, which ended up being over 200 comments on this first post. The hate, the vitriol, what they were saying about mikvah, about Jews, about shuls, about taxes, whatever they could think of, they were throwing at us, and all within the context of this hearing for the mikvah. That totally shook up our whole world. Anybody working on the mikvah in the community. I try to actually contact the chief of police to have more police patrols. I got 2 cameras up on the front of the building, and I placed this big piece of wood, big square piece of wood that says secured by simplified security. I'm like, that was my little ishtadlus, to just try to make things a little more secure for the mikvah. And I knew that my work now begins talking to the neighbors. I start knocking on doors and try to just be relaxed and say, hey, you got the notice in the mail about the mikvah? If you have any questions, I would love to answer them. I got a mostly positive response. Most non-Jews appreciated that I actually came to spend the time to speak to them. Some of them I spent 45 minutes speaking with. There was one neighbor. His name was Mike. His driveway is the other side of the street of our mikvah building. I have to get through to him. I need to speak to him. It was Sunday morning. I come outside of the mikvah building. So I slowly approached. I'm like, Mike, is it a good time to talk about the mikvah project? You got something in the mail? He says, yeah, sure. First thing he says, I don't know why they're making you crazy. Why do you even need a variance? That's beautiful. That's good to hear. At least I know he's friendly. The next thing he said was even more surprising. He's like, why don't you build a shul? He says, I knew many people in the Lakewood community. I used to have a mechanic shop, Central Car Care. I sold it to Arkadis, I think for 17 years. He said many years he had it in Lakewood. He says 90% of my clientele were Jewish, and I only had good experiences with them. Can you imagine a mechanic shop? What goes on in a mechanic shop? People are upset that their car's not ready, things weren't done right, it broke again. And to have only good experiences with Jews from the Lakewood community, and he's doing this for 17 years, that was spectacular just to hear that, next level. But then he says, from the many prominent people he knew, I guess through the interactions of the mechanic shop, there was one person, a very special person, Rabbi Gissinger. He's like, 30 years ago, me and my wife were trying to start a family. We were struggling. Someone told us Rabbi Gissinger is an expert in this field. And we consulted with him, and Rabbi Gissinger led him to Dr. Jerome Check in Cherry Hill. And because of that, he has his family, he has his 4 children. He says, I am eternally grateful to Rabbi Gissinger for what he did for me. After hearing from Mike about all his positive impressions of the Jewish community and his deep feelings for Rabbi Gissinger, I asked him if he would be willing to share his perspective at the variance hearing. it could make a big difference. Amazingly, Mike turned to me and said, I will do it. He tells me these days people stop by the mikvah. They heard about the project, they're curious what this building is. He says, I strike up conversations. He says, I could be quiet, I don't have to say anything, but I strike up conversations. And what? He says, people are very upset. He says, and I defend you guys. I say, where do you live? 8 blocks away? What do you care? Doesn't have to do with you. So, not just we have a non-Jew who's friendly to Jews. He's actually our defender. What? From a story of 30 years ago, what Rabbi Gissinger did for him. The story of the mikvah approvals is not over yet, with further hearings scheduled soon. Imagine a world where we have more mics, more neighbors willing to come to the hearings and testify positively towards the mikvah project. Imagine a world like that. Imagine how not only Manchester would be different, but the entire globe far and wide.
Once the neighborhoods get to know us, our true selves, and they learn about our tzedakah, our chesed, our kibbud aim, our chinuch of our children, they appreciate it, and they love it, and they want us as neighbors. We have the opportunity to create a monster Kiddush Hashem every single day. People say, oh, that Jewish guy, oh, he's like our neighbor. They're so nice, those people. And the communities thrive.